I never paid attention to what she did with her phone. I wasn't the type. We had a quiet trust, or at least I thought we did. So when she started keeping it face down, I didn't question it. When she started taking calls on the balcony, I told myself she needed air. When she stopped asking me how my day was, I told myself she already knew the answer. I let 1,000 tiny red flags wave without raising my head once. And that was my mistake. The party was at a villa on the cliffside, one of those places that looked too pristine to be real. We were invited by people I barely knew, friends of hers mostly. Or at least that's what she told me. I stood near the stone archway with a glass of flat champagne in my hand, watching her disappear into the crowd like water into sand. Her dress was pale blue, a shade that made her seem like she didn't belong to the world. She barely looked in my direction all night. There was a moment, brief, almost forgettable, when I saw her with him. He wore a dark green suit and didn't bother hiding the way he looked at her. The kind of look that didn't belong at a public event. His hand brushed her waist. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She leaned in and whispered something into his ear. I couldn't move. It felt like the room folded in on itself. Every sound became muffled, like I was underwater. I left the party without telling her. I waited in the car for 2 hours. When she finally slid into the passenger seat, she didn't offer an explanation, didn't ask why I was shaking. She just said, "Let's not do this now. I'm tired." That night I didn't sleep. I walked through our apartment like it was a stranger's home. I touched the framed photos and wondered how many of them were real memories. How many were just scenery in a story she'd rewritten. The next morning, her phone buzzed at 6:12 a.m. I didn't mean to look. I swear I didn't. But the name on the screen wasn't saved. Just a number. And the message? 5 words. Last night was worth it. My hand didn't shake. My chest didn't burn. It was something else. Like being dunked in ice water after a long fever. Cold clarity. I stared at the screen until the light faded, then got dressed like it was any other day. Made coffee. Washed my face. When she came into the kitchen, I handed her the phone. I didn't say a word. She read the message, smirked, put the phone down. "Don't be dramatic," she said. Just like that. No stutter. No panic. Her tone wasn't even defensive, it was bored. She walked past me and opened the fridge. I didn't follow her. I just stood there, rooted in the middle of the room with a question that no longer needed an answer. The truth wasn't hidden. It was worn casually like perfume. I smelled it now, thick in the air. This was no accident. No one-time mistake. This had been going on. And worse? She didn't even bother to deny it. I waited until she left for work. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. Just grabbed her bag and disappeared down the hallway like a guest checking out of a hotel. I stood in the silence she left behind, surrounded by things we bought together. Furniture, framed prints, little trinkets from weekend trips, and I felt like a ghost in a play I didn't audition for. I went back to the kitchen. Her phone was still on the counter. She never forgot it. Not once in the 5 years we lived together. But this time she did. Maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe it was bait. I picked it up, not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I needed to see how deep the betrayal went. The messages were all there. Weeks of them. Conversations that didn't try to hide. Times and dates. Plans made in front of me, disguised as errands or dinner with friends. He wasn't just anyone. He had a nickname in her contacts, M. Like this was a game they played. And the worst part? She talked about me, casually, like I was some inconvenient roommate who didn't know when to disappear. She still thinks he's sweet. I can't stand how polite he is. Too quiet, too careful. I hate when he watches me like I'm some kind of glass doll. Can't wait till it's just you and me. No more walking on eggshells. Eggshells? I was the one walking around mine, tiptoeing through a home where I wasn't welcome anymore. Every kind word, every favor, every sacrifice. I saw now how they'd been quietly ridiculed behind my back. I spent the rest of the day doing nothing. Not crying, not shouting, just watching the light move across the walls, thinking of how I'd lost someone who had already left long ago. When she returned that evening, she looked surprised to find me still there. I sat on the couch, her phone in my hand. I didn't hide it. I didn't need to. "You read them," she said flatly. I nodded. She dropped her bag. "So what? You gonna kick me out now?" There was no fear in her voice. No apology. Just challenge. Like I was the one on trial. "Who is he?" I asked. She shrugged. "A man who sees me. A man who sees her." And what was I? Blind? Background noise? "I gave you everything," I said quietly. Not because I wanted her to feel guilt. I knew that was impossible. But because I needed to hear it out loud. "Yeah," she replied. "That was the problem. I didn't ask for any of it." She turned away, walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water like nothing had happened. Like we weren't standing in the middle of a battlefield where she'd already claimed victory and salted the earth. "I think you should leave tonight," I said, my voice steady, colder than I thought I was capable of. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for time or fight for the marriage or even bother to pretend she cared. She simply said, "Fine." She packed her things with surgical precision. Only her side of the closet, only what belonged to her. No words, no tears, just the sound of zippers and drawers and shoes being placed in a bag. Before she closed the door behind her, she looked at me once. "You'll be fine," she said. "You always were too soft to feel this kind of pain for long." And then she was gone. But she was wrong. I wasn't soft. I was fractured, and fractures spread. The days that followed weren't filled with tears or rage. That would have been easier. No, what came was something quieter, more venomous. A dull hum beneath the skin, like a swarm of hornets waiting to sting. I didn't speak to anyone. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't explain it without sounding insane. How do you tell people the woman you built a life with walked away without looking back? But silence has a voice, and it started speaking. First, it came through the whispers from her side of the family. Her sister messaged me 2 days after the breakup. Polite, cold. She told us what happened. You should respect her decision and move on. No curiosity. No request for my side. Just dismissal served neat. Then came the accusation. It arrived as a voicemail from her father. A brittle, clipped message that barely lasted 15 seconds. "We didn't raise her to be treated like that. If you really stole from her like she said, I hope you're proud." I played it back 3 times. Stole? I checked my bank accounts, our shared statements. Nothing was missing. Nothing that belonged to her anyway. We'd never argued about money. I paid most of the bills without complaint. Gave her access to everything. There was no theft. So why say that? Then it hit me. She was laying a foundation. A story. Called her. 1 ring. 2. Straight to voicemail. My hands were steady, but my breath wasn't. I didn't leave a message. I didn't need to. She already knew why I was calling. I sat at the desk we used to share and started digging. And what I found made my stomach cave in. She had gone to my employer, filed a formal complaint, said I had used company resources to track her movements, that I'd installed unauthorized software, that I'd violated her privacy. The investigation had already begun, quietly, internally. No one had told me, but her version of the truth had already started to take root. When I called HR, their tone was measured but tense. "We're not accusing you of anything. We're simply doing our due diligence." Due diligence. The corporate equivalent of a cold knife to the spine. I sat there stunned. Not because she'd lied, I'd seen what she was capable of, but because she was escalating. She wasn't just trying to end our relationship. She was trying to erase me. I drove to my parents' house that evening. I needed to see their faces, hear their voices. Something to remind me I wasn't losing my grip on reality. But when I arrived, their door didn't open. Not right away. Eventually, my mother came out, eyes hard. My father stood behind her, arms crossed. "We know what you did," she said. "She told us everything." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing left in me. "She told you I stole from her?" I asked. My father's lips were tight. "She said you hacked her phone, that you threatened her. She showed us texts." "Texts? I never sent her anything like that." "She showed them to us," my mother snapped. "We saw them." And just like that, I understood. She had fabricated proof. Screenshots. Texts that never existed. She was turning me into a villain, one message at a time. I stood on their porch while the wind blew through the trees and thought about how carefully she must have planned this. About how long she must have been building this image of me. They didn't invite me in. I slept in my car that night, parked outside the same house I once called home. She'd taken more than our marriage. She was taking my name. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just drifted in and out of half-conscious thoughts, each one anchored to the same sick realization. She wasn't content with leaving me. She wanted to destroy me. The next morning, I returned to our apartment. Not to see her, of course, she was long gone, but to gather whatever strength I had left. The place looked sterile now, like it had been drained of its memories. Her favorite books were gone. The photograph of us in Lisbon, the one I never liked because I blinked in it, had vanished from the frame and left a faint outline on the wall. I turned on my laptop. I needed evidence. Anything to show I hadn't done what she claimed. I backed up my phone records, messages, emails. I took screenshots, archived chats, everything. I didn't even know what I was looking for yet, but I knew she had lied, and I knew she was smart enough to cover her tracks. 3 days passed. I went to work with eyes on my back, polite smiles with tight undertones. I was no longer just a colleague. I was the guy in that situation. No one said it directly, but I felt it in the way conversations stopped when I walked into rooms. And then, another blow. I was called into a meeting, HR again. But this time legal was present. She had filed for a restraining order. She claimed I had followed her, that I had shown up to her new residence uninvited, had shouted threats outside her building. All of it false. I hadn't even seen her since the night she left. "Do you have an alibi for the night of the 17th? They asked. Yes. I was at home, alone, watching old films on mute because silence had become more comfortable than sound. "That won't hold up," the legal rep said, adjusting his glasses. "You need something verifiable." So I gave them access to my security camera, the one I'd installed in our apartment hallway a year ago after a package was stolen. I pulled the footage from that night, showed them I never left, never even opened the front door. They looked stunned, but not surprised, like this was part of some corporate dance they'd rehearsed before. "Thank you," the HR woman said. "We'll take this under consideration." Consideration. My character, my freedom, my sanity, everything about me was now subject to review. I went home and called her, not because I expected her to answer, but because I needed her to hear the message. It went straight to voicemail. "You know I didn't do those things," I said calmly. "You know exactly what you're doing, and I don't know why. I don't know what this is supposed to get you, but I'm done playing defense. I'm not just going to let you rewrite the story." I hung up. Later that evening, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, no signature, just a single message and 2 attached files. The message read, "I think you deserve the truth. She's done this before." The files were scans of legal documents from a man in another city. Same accusations, same restraining order, same patterns. And at the end of the statement, one line underlined in ink. I never thought she could twist love into something weaponized. But she did. And I let her. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I doubted it, but because it confirmed what I already knew in my bones. She was a pattern. And I had been her most recent template. That I printed the documents from the anonymous email and held them in my hands like a confession. The man's name was Marcus. His testimony was dry and clinical, but between the lines, I could read the same unraveling I'd gone through. Accusations, lies, legal traps, emotional sabotage disguised as innocence. I had a name. I had a thread. The next morning, I took a risk and reached out. I found a number attached to the old case documents. Left a voicemail. He called me back 2 hours later. "I wondered when someone else would find me," Marcus said, his voice tired but sharp. "You're the third. How long were you with her?" I asked. 6 months. That was enough. She moved in fast, got close even faster. Then came the manipulation, the staged fights, the vague threats. Eventually, she claimed I hit her. I had to fight that for nearly a year. "Did anyone believe you?" "Not at first," he said. "But I kept records. And I found someone she did it to before me. So she was a cycle, pattern, a practiced hand in playing the victim with just enough truth laced in her lies to make them believable. I wasn't just collateral damage. I was a chapter in a book she'd written more than once." I thanked him. He paused before hanging up. "She'll hit a wall eventually. She always does. But by then, it's too late for most of us." I ended the call and sat still for a long time. No rage, no despair. Just the quiet realization that I was no longer mourning a person. I was mourning the version of myself that had trusted her. The next day, I hired a lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't care about shaming her or exposing her to the world. I wanted the record corrected. I wanted my name cleared. I handed over every email, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that proved I hadn't stalked her, hadn't stolen from her, hadn't done any of the things she claimed. My lawyer, a woman with eyes like stone, didn't flinch as she read the details. "She's careful," she said, "but she got sloppy with those screenshots. They're edited. I can prove it." So we began building, not just a defense but a counter. And then, just as the first sparks of justice began flickering, she returned. Not to apologize, not to beg. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, as if none of it had happened. I opened the door and found her standing there with her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. "Can I come in?" "No." Her lip curled slightly. "You're angry." "Angry was 2 months ago." She crossed her arms. "I need your help." I laughed. A low, disbelieving sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. "You tried to ruin me." I was scared. "No. You were cornered. There's a difference." She glanced behind her, as if someone might be watching. "They're turning on me," she said quietly. "My family, his family, everyone. I thought you would at least." "You lied." I cut in. "You created a version of me that never existed. And now you want me to help you because karma finally made it to your doorstep." She blinked. Just once. But I saw it. Fear. Not the kind I'd shown when I thought I was losing her. A different kind. The fear of someone who had run out of stories to tell. "You should go," I said. And she did. But not before whispering, "You'll regret this." No. For the first time since she left, I knew exactly what I wouldn't regret. Letting her walk away with nothing. It was 2 weeks after she showed up at my door when the headlines began to circulate. Small at first, local gossip, social media whispers, and a few vague posts on professional networking sites. But it didn't stay small. The man she had moved on to, the one she had used to build her story against me, had gone public. Not on purpose, perhaps. He'd been arrested. Embezzlement. Fraud. Misuse of corporate funds. A full audit exposed everything. And she was listed in the report. Not as a criminal. Not yet. But as a beneficiary. A quiet phrase that spoke volumes. Trips charged to the company card. Designer gifts expensed as business development. Her signature in just enough places to stain her image without completely burying her. I watched it unfold from a distance. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel satisfaction. What I felt was emptier than that. She had played every role: victim, partner, accuser. Now the curtain was falling, and she had no stage left to stand on. But the fallout didn't stop with her. My parents called. First my mother. Her voice was thin, uncertain. We saw the articles. We didn't know. We should have listened. You told us you didn't do it." I didn't say anything. Then my father, the man who had stared through me like a stranger on his doorstep, spoke more softly than I'd ever heard him. "She fooled us all, son. I'm sorry. We want to make things right." Now they wanted to come back. Now they wanted to be part of the truth. Now that it was safe. But apologies don't fix silence. And they had let me drown while she handed them bricks. Still, I met them. Not out of forgiveness, but because closure sometimes needs a witness. We sat at a quiet cafe. My mother cried before she said a word. My father didn't touch his coffee. "She said you threatened her." My mother whispered. "She showed us messages. They were fake, weren't they?" I nodded. My father exhaled, long and slow. "How did we get it so wrong?" "Because you chose to believe the voice that screamed loudest," I thought. "Because I was too quiet for drama. Because I was the safe one, and she was the show." "I'm not angry," I said. "But I won't pretend this didn't cost me everything." They didn't ask for instant forgiveness. For once, they just listened. That was enough for now. The legal case against her began moving. Slowly, carefully. My lawyer filed a counterclaim for defamation. Submitted the fabricated messages. Presented Marcus's case and the anonymous testimony. It would take time, but the process had begun. She would answer for what she tried to do. I left the cafe and walked home, the wind brushing cold against my face. I thought of her, not with longing, not with hate, just curiosity. What kind of person builds a life on ruins and then screams when it caves in? And then it hit me, her greatest fear was never being caught. It was being irrelevant. She used lies like currency, and now she was bankrupt. The media interest grew like a slow burn. At first, it was confined to corners of the internet, a few speculative forums, a legal blog picking up steam. Then the story got picked up by a mid-tier digital outlet. A headline that punched harder than any truth ever could. Whistleblower or widowmaker. The curious collapse of a corporate darling. They didn't name her directly, yet, but anyone who knew the players could connect the dots. And suddenly, she wasn't just a private mess. She was a public question mark. I watched from the sidelines. My name hadn't surfaced, and I planned to keep it that way. This wasn't about revenge. This was about boundaries. About rebuilding the version of myself she tried to burn down. My lawyer sent me updates in bursts. The fabricated screenshots had been verified as manipulated. One of the supposed text exchanges showed a date stamp that didn't align with my phone's activity log or tower pings. Sloppy work. Desperation wrapped in digital ink. Then the final card flipped. Marcus reached out again. This time with more than words. He kept voice recordings, calls, conversations, arguments. I told him once I didn't want to dig that deep. But now he had something else. A recorded call between her and the man she'd most recently imploded with. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't even angry. It was surgical. She spoke about how she used people. Flatly. As if discussing weather patterns or taxes. She admitted to planting evidence. She joked about how easy it was to sway people with a single tear at the right moment. She described me not by name but by behavior, by silence, by the way he stares when he thinks you're not watching. That was enough. My lawyer listened to the recording 3 times. This will bury her, she said. But I wasn't looking to bury her. The truth had already done that. Instead, I made a different decision. We filed for an official retraction from the legal institutions that had marked my name. The restraining order was nullified. My work record cleared. The claims, both professional and personal, were formally labeled unsubstantiated and retaliatory in nature. I was clean, but she was unraveling. A mutual acquaintance sent me a message. A short, strange note. She's gone off the radar. Quit her job. No one's seen her in a week. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I knew what happened when the spotlight went out and there was no audience left to feed her. But the world doesn't end when a liar disappears. It just goes quiet. And in that quiet, I heard something new. Myself. The silence that followed wasn't peace. Not at first. It was more like standing in the aftermath of a storm. Unsure if the sky was truly clear or just pausing for breath. I spent days waiting for another knock on the door. Another twist. Another ambush. But nothing came. Instead, the days stretched long and uneventful. No headlines. No new messages. She was truly gone. At work, things normalized. People stopped looking through me like I was made of glass. A few colleagues even apologized, quiet, awkward gestures in passing. One brought me coffee. Another left a sticky note on my desk. Glad you stayed. But even as life resumed, I wasn't the same man walking through it. She had taken something intangible with her. My instinct to trust, my ability to surrender fully to another person without question. And yet, strangely, I didn't mourn that loss anymore. Because in its place, something else was forming. Clarity. One evening, just before dusk, I got a letter. Real ink. Real paper. No return address. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for her voice. But it wasn't hers. It was her mother's. I know you have no reason to believe a word I say, and maybe you never will. But I'm writing to tell you the truth I didn't have the courage to admit before. I saw what she was becoming. Years ago, we tried to stop it, her father and I, but she learned early how to weaponize pain. She learned it from watching someone else in our family do the same. We failed you by staying silent. And we failed her by letting her believe she could always get away with it. The letter ended with no plea for forgiveness. Just an acknowledgement that silence, too, can be a betrayal. I didn't know whether to feel comforted or even more alone. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with the legal documents, the screenshots, the printed lies, all the weight of that chapter confined to a single space. I went for a walk that night, the kind I used to take before everything went dark. My old routine, past the bookstore with the ivy-covered wall, around the edge of the park where she once made me take photos of her in the autumn light. I stopped at the bench near the fountain. There was a boy there, maybe 10, flying a paper airplane and laughing when it nosedived into the dirt. His mother watched from nearby, not interfering, just letting him try, letting him fail. It struck me sharply and without warning that I hadn't failed. Not really. She had framed me, yes, lied, turned my life inside out, but I had not become her. I hadn't lashed out, hadn't sunk to her level. I had stood still, gathered evidence, and endured. That was strength. And slowly, it was turning into something else. Resilience. The final legal hearing was more ceremonial than dramatic. By then, her credibility had evaporated. She didn't show up. Her lawyer submitted a quiet withdrawal from the defamation counterclaim. No fight left in the motion. The court clerk read the final declaration in a monotone voice. All allegations made against the respondent were found to be fabricated and malicious in nature. Formal clearance and record correction granted. The judge didn't look at me when it was over. He didn't need to. This wasn't a courtroom for vengeance. It was a burial site for lies. As I walked out of the building, the sun was high, almost arrogant in its brightness. And yet I felt weightless. Not because justice had triumphed, but because I had survived it. That afternoon, I received another message. This one came from a burner email, anonymous, untraceable, but unmistakably hers. I didn't think it would end like this. I thought you'd come find me. I thought you needed me more than your pride. You don't even care, do you? There was no apology, no remorse, just the echo of her desperation disguised as control. I deleted it without replying. She had been right about one thing. I didn't need her. But she had misunderstood what pride meant. It wasn't arrogance. It was self-respect, hard-earned. Forged in the fire she lit and tried to trap me in. I went back to the apartment and packed a box I'd been avoiding. Inside were small remnants, receipts, notes she'd written during better times, a bracelet she'd once pretended to misplace. I didn't feel sentimental. I felt clean. That evening, I donated the entire box to a local charity thrift store. Not because I wanted someone else to carry the weight, but because letting go needed to be complete. Not burned, not buried, just passed on. Out of my hands, out of my home. As I left the store, a man held the door for me. "You look lighter," he said casually, not knowing anything about me. "I am," I replied. He smiled and moved on. And I meant it. Lighter. Not because I had erased the pain, but because I had carried it long enough to understand it wasn't mine to hold forever. She had tried to take everything. My reputation, my relationships, my future. But what she could never touch was what I'd built in the silence. A foundation. And now it was mine again. Untouched. Unshaken. Ready. It's strange how quiet redemption is. You expect trumpets, fireworks, some dramatic shift in the weather. But in the end, it's just another morning. You wake up, open the blinds, and the sunlight doesn't accuse you anymore. The floor doesn't creak with old guilt. The mirror doesn't look like a trial. It's just you again. Maybe not exactly who you were before, but someone worth being. I moved out of the apartment. Not because of the memories, but because it belonged to another life. A version of me that lived too long in shadow, holding on to something already rotten. I found a small place near the edge of the city. Quiet, with big windows and no ghosts. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. Nothing dramatic, abstract colors, bold lines, the kind of pieces that say what words can't. I hung one of them by the window. A mess of red streaks and black fractures over white. A friend said it looked like anger learned how to breathe. Maybe that's what healing really is. Letting your rage exhale. I reconnected with people carefully, slowly. Not everyone came back, but a few did. My sister, who had kept her distance during the fallout, showed up one day with homemade soup and the same old sarcasm in her voice. "So, you're not a cybercriminal after all." Shame. That would have made our family reunions more interesting. We laughed. Really laughed. And it didn't feel brittle. Months passed. Then one morning a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a book. One of mine that had gone missing. On the inside cover, a note written in handwriting I once knew like breath. You always said I never finished anything. Here's one thing returned. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you weren't wrong. No name, just that. I closed the book and shelved it. Not to remember her, but to remind myself that even lies can run out of air. People ask me sometimes what happened. The ones who don't know the full story. I tell them the truth in pieces. I tell them that love, when twisted by ego, becomes poison. That some people aren't looking for partners, they're looking for mirrors, and they'll break you if your reflection doesn't match the fantasy. But I also tell them this: you can survive it. You can be disowned, betrayed, accused, and humiliated, and still stand taller after the dust settles. You can be framed, forgotten, and blamed, and still learn how to breathe in rooms you once felt trapped in. Because healing isn't about going back. It's about moving forward with nothing you didn't earn yourself. My family eventually came back. So did friends. Opportunities returned. Not all of them, but enough. And me? I didn't just come back. I rebuilt. From the truth. From the ashes. From myself.